Hello and welcome to our broadcast. I'm your host, Trepanier, Senior Vice President and System Chief Nursing Officer at Providence. As a reminder, the information provided during this event is for information purposes only. If you have any medical questions, please reach out to your primary care, or healthcare professional. So joining me today during this live event is Jennifer McNamara, a registered nurse from California. Jennifer, welcome.
Thank you, Sil. I'm glad to be here.
It's great to be spending time with you today. I was really looking forward to it. You know, we only have 30 minutes. This 30 minutes is just going to fly by. So let's just like dive right in. And maybe, for the benefit of our audience, please just tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
I'm a registered nurse. This is a second career for me. I've only been a registered nurse for about 8 years. I started off working in oncology, went from the oncology floor to chemo infusion. Then I moved to the ambulatory site. So I now work for Providence St. Joseph Health Heritage in Orange County, California. And I was a supervisor at one of the sites, and now I'm the clinical program manager. So I make sure that all the sites are in compliance with safety, that they any new procedures that we're rolling out, that those get implemented and everybody is trained properly. I can be a little bit of an HR. We kind of bounce around and do a little bit of everything to help the sites that have questions.
Awesome. You know what's amazing about the conversations I've been having through these sessions. I end up talking to nurses who are practicing in multiple areas of the and when you talk to anybody out there when they're thinking about nurses, they have this image of this nurses working in an acute care setting and in a hospital setting, and yet we have nurses working across the entire span, and the role is very different from one area to the other. I want to ask you a little bit about what does the role of a nurse looks like in that setting, but before I do that, can you so Jennifer, when did Jennifer decide she wanted to be a nurse, and why being a nurse?
I had always wanted to be a nurse. It was a passion of mine. My aunt was a surgical heart nurse, and she inspired me when I was younger. And everybody's like, "Oh, go be a doctor." I'm like, "No, I don't want to be a doctor. I want to be a nurse." And unfortunately, life kind of took a little bit of a turn, and I wasn't able to go that avenue. But when the opportunity arose, and I was able to go back to school and be a nurse, I love it. I feel like I've been doing it all my life. It is totally my passion, and I know it's where I was meant to be.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So let's go back to a nurse in a clinic setting.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about what is the life, a day in the life of a nurse in a clinic setting looks like.
Well, there's a variety of roles in the clinic setting. You can be, we have what we call a new program we're doing, which is team based care, where the nurse actually sees patients. They have a scope of practice and they can see patients who have UTIs or a wellness visit. They can do that, which gives access to patients when the providers are overbooked. I think it's a great program that we offer. There's also where I was, where as a supervisor. So I was doing clinical training. I was doing HR, learning a little bit more of the leadership skills. And then where I'm at now, it is all leadership and working with the sites and working with the CNO to create any new protocols, anything that we feel like we get questions daily from the sites. Well, how do we handle this? For example, an onboarding tool. What's the best way to do an onboarding tool for all our for the medical assistants, the LVNs, and the RNs? And so we're working on rolling out something with our sites that is congruent across all the sites. so that they have the tools that they need to do their job as well as be good nurses.
When you talked about the nurses in the clinic setting doing, wellness clinics, having their own assignment and seeing patients, what type of nurses are we talking about here? My assumption is we're talking about advanced practice registered nurses. Is that the case, or are there cases where registered nurses are also seeing patients? Can you maybe make the differentiation between the two for our audience?
Absolutely. So it is a new system that they've rolled out probably the last couple of years. So it's a team-based care nurse. So this nurse does see regular patients. It's not an advanced practice nurse. So usually they have three providers, an advanced practice, either a nurse or a physician's assistant, and then they have a nurse. So what ends up happening is they get daily tasks. Patients, have questions. They send a message and say, I'm having these issues. And if it's something there's a specific scope of practice for the RN, and they can see UTIs, they can see some shoulder pain, some knee pain. They can do what we call the wellness visit. And then what happens is if they're seeing a patient and it turns into be more than their scope, what's called a flip visit. And then we get the provider, and then the provider that then sees the patient. So it kind of gives the nurse a little bit of an autonomy, but not necessarily an advanced practice nurse, but a little bit of an autonomy, which is, I think, a great skill to have. And it keeps it, you still get to do patient care, but you're not necessarily on the floor.
Yeah, absolutely. T- Um, when I hear about that, and I've actually had to experience this myself as a patient, experiencing being serviced that way, and now I know a lot about it. So Joe, coming from community X that knows doesn't know much about the differentiation between the various roles that someone could have in a clinic. What kind of responses are we getting from patients about the type of people that they get to see? Like, are the communities more and more open in receiving care by other than a traditional physician, if you will, in a clinic? How is that received, generally speaking?
You know what? We've had a great response to it. What we end up telling the patient, the patients that they need to do is that they need to. The nurse goes through and says, "Hey, I'm working with Doctor So and So and Doctor So and So. I'm connected directly to them." And so because I'm connected directly to them, any questions that you have will go to them. So if they're, it's all a team. So we're here as a team. So building on upon that team, it's like I'm part of this team. So you needed to really get in, but Dr. Jones was not available today, and neither was Dr. Bloom. So I have a nurse here that can see you, and you can get access to care, and it's still in the same group. So still in the same team. And we've been doing surveys, and the surveys have come out that the nurses, patients are loving it. They love the attitude that the nurses have. They love that they are able to get in a more timely fashion, and they've had a great response.
That's great. That's great. For the audience at large that's listening to this right now, it's great to hear from you directly that it is well received. There's a significant body of literature today also that supports the experience that you're describing here, where patients tend to actually enjoy, appreciate, and are very well satisfied by being cared by an entire team in a primary care settings, and the outcomes also are showing to be as good as they are. So good job for you for promoting it and supporting it and making it available for our patients. I really appreciate that. I'm I'm reminded as I'm looking at your background, the last time that you and I chatted, you were telling me that this picture was taken in Kenya, if I remember correctly. Um, can you please tell us a little bit more about that? And I want to know more about, so you were in Kenya doing what exactly? And
Absolutely. So our church partners, and they have a medical team that goes to several countries, and one of them is Kenya. This was my second time, and so we partner with a school called Missions of Hope, and there's a missionary nurse out there that sets up all the sites, and when we go out, so there were 3 doctors, probably 7 nurses, a couple EMTs, and we all went to we flew to Kenya, and we went to very rural areas of Kenya that need access to care. We The providers saw the patients. We did baseline BMIs, height, weight on the patients. We did have a lot of the children have malaria, or they're dehydrated because they don't have access to water or food. So we were treating patients. We did a lot of a wound care because they just don't have wound care. And a really cool thing that we did this time was we had a school nurse who went with us, and she did eye chart exams for reading. And we brought readers, and some of these kids were actually like at +5 on their readers, which is, I mean, you're young kids, but we'd put the glasses on them, and then we'd retest them, and they could see. And it's just amazing to be able to help communities that really need it. And even the littlest things like sunglasses, they don't have access to sunglasses, and it's hot and it's dry. And we handed one of the guys a pair of our sunglasses, and they're like, oh my gosh, what a difference it makes because of eye care, and how damaging the sun is to our eyes, and we have that access and they don't. But we saw over 1,400 students and community within 6 days.
oh wow.
It was pretty amazing, and it makes me want to do so much more. And as a nurse, I was glad I was able to take that time to go and take care of the kids in the community and help them in any way that we could.
Sometimes I get asked about opportunities to do this, and one of the most common question I get from nurses who are considering doing this, they go like, "Do I need a special license to practice nursing?" Like in Kenya, for instance,
No,
did you have to do something different in order to be able to practice as a nurse there?
no, not at all. No, nothing special. I did have to show them, my current license that I had, and I had to have my basic life support. But other than that, no, nothing that is needed. Because they don't have access to care, they have nurses who do. Their scope is they really don't have a scope. They can just do about anything because it's what they have. There are a couple of nurses associated with the school, but they're the pharmacist, they're the nurse. They're doing a little bit of everything, and they're triaging the patients day and night. And they just because there is no access, um, they do what they can. And so yeah, there's no specific license over there.
Anything anything you learned about yourself post mission trip? Maybe not
Um,
necessarily this one since this is a second one for you, but anything that you've learned about yourself through that experience.
I've learned that no matter what the situation is, I can do it. No matter how uncomfortable it is, because some of those situations are not comfortable and it's scary. You're like, what? Am I going to do this right? Am I doing the right thing? So I've learned that I can push the boundaries with myself, and even though I feel uncomfortable, that it's okay. And I think that's something even as a floor nurse that you learn. Sometimes you're doing stuff and you're like, I've only done this once or twice, and I have to do it again. And you have to muster up that confidence and say, you know what, I can do this. I know how to do this. And I think it's given me more of that personal inner confidence.
Yeah, I appreciate that. That reminds me, what's that expression? Don't let perfection be the enemy of good, or something to that effect, where we oftentimes find ourselves, particularly as clinicians, we're raised in evidence-based, model. We're raised in an environment where everything has to be like, and rightfully so, right? Our T's are crossed and our I's are dotted, and we want to make sure that everything is done, by the book. And there are certain circumstances, i.e. in somewhere in a remote bush of Kenya, that you don't have all of you don't have all the tools or the widgets or the gadgets that you need, but you have yourself, and and you can do so much good.
I feel blessed that I was able to be a part of that team and to go, and the second time I would definitely go again, but every time I go, I learn something more, and I just get touched by the communities, and it makes me want to do more because we have such an abundance here, and they don't have anything. And these kids, they just smile and dance and laugh, and they could be hurting, and it's just you learn to take their joy. It's the joy in the simple things.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing. I appreciate that, and thank you for your service, being able to extend our practice and our discipline across the globe like that. So appreciate you doing that for sure.
Thank you.
I'm as you do this, I'm wondering, we've all, my sense as nurses is that we've all had this moment in our career as a nurse that just sticks with us. It's very different for everyone. Sometimes it's a patient, sometimes it's a colleague, whatever that is. What's that moment that sticks with you as a practicing nurse? And maybe tell us a little bit about that.
Absolutely. It sticks with me to this day. So when I was working in chemo infusion, we had a lot of patients who, were unsure. They had a lot of different things going on in life. And I had one patient, and she, unfortunately, she was near the end, and she really needed hospice. And she came in, and she came in for treatment, and I just knew she was not well enough to do treatment. So I had pulled the doctor. I had talked to the daughter, and the daughter's like, she's afraid of hospice. She doesn't, she doesn't understand what hospice is. She thinks they're just going to give her morphine and let her die. So I went and I talked to my charge nurse at the time and said, I'm going to take a few minutes. I'm going to talk to this patient. And I sat down with her and just explained to her what exactly hospice was, that it's not, they're not just going to give you morphine and die. You'll be at home. You're going to be taken care of. And, they're going to take such good care of you, and you're going to be you're going to be able to be with your children and be at home. And we just walked through the whole role, and she took a bit. We talked to the daughter, and the daughter, she was very appreciative, but it made me, first of all, feel like, patients don't always understand these terminology we talk about, palliative care versus hospice care. What's the difference? How do you know what to do and where to go? And it just made me really feel like I always need to advocate for my patients, no matter what, because she was just like, I know I'm going to continue to do treatment. I'm going to do this. And I felt like if I hadn't advocated for her at that time, and then took the time to really explain to her what was going to happen and where she was going to be, that she would have, unfortunately, she would have died, anxious and not in a peaceful manner. And her daughter did. She passed away probably a week later, and her daughter called me and talked to me and thanked me for my time. But it just made me. It still makes me tear up a little bit. She's the patient I will always remember, and always teaches me that no matter what the situation is, that we need to take time and we need to advocate for our patients, whether we agree or disagree, but we really need to advocate.
It's thank you for sharing that story. What a privilege we have to share and to be present, and to hold people as they go through these transitions. I mean, the gifts that offers us is pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Pretty amazing. You know, the last 2.5 years have been a really big challenge. I find that it's been a challenge, you know, personally and professionally. You know, nurses have taken a pretty big they've taken the brunt of what's, you know, what's happened with the world pandemic, and as evidence with, you know, where we find ourselves today. You and I know very well what the challenges are. Some, I suspect most of the audience know as well. But one thing that the last 2.5 years have taught me is how to be comfortable at being uncomfortable.
That is a true statement.
I wonder about you. So how about you? Right? What learnings have come about for you uh, with the pandemic, which, you know, it's not over with yet by any stretch of the imagination. We're a much better place. I will, you know, I'll say that, but it's still, you know, still lingering out there, and many people are, you know, pretty sick. So what has that taught you?
You know, the last couple of years have been challenging. I was actually even pulled off from working in the ambulatory clinics to be put in the hospitals during COVID time. And, you know, it did it. Your great sentiment, you know, to be uncomfortable with the uncomfortable, or to be comfortable with the uncomfortable, because it is all uncomfortable. And to be able to, I think it taught me more compassion for the patients and the families, as well as, you know, the other nurses, because you know, we were all hit so hard with it and dealing with it. And I think that we all need to take time, no matter who we are, and just make sure we take care of ourselves. You know, we're so busy taking care of others because it's our calling and that's what we love to do. And during this pandemic, you know, the nurses, everybody stepped up and they did what they needed to do. But I think that it does, you need to take some time for yourself, whether it's, and I learned this, you know, myself, just to keep yourself in check, you know, whether it's 30 minutes a day, you know, reading a book or doing some yoga or just meditating, or, you know, or if it's reading scripture, whatever it is, to take that time for you mentally, because if you're not mentally well, then it's harder for you to help others and to be compassionate. And that's where I've really found that I really need to find that inner peace in working, you know, taking that time for myself, which is hard, you know, as a mom and a nurse, you kind of, you're back and forth and you're like, okay, I got to take care of the kids. I got to take care of the husband. I got to take care of the patients. And we want to be on the top of our game. But if we don't take care of ourselves, then it's harder to take care of others.
So what do you do to take care of yourself, Jennifer?
Um, I actually take some time every morning to do a devotional and spend time in the Word of God, which prepares me for the day.
Good for you. Good for you. Thanks for sharing.
No problem.
And the reason why I'm asking you the question directly that way is because uh, oftentimes when people hear, you know, you need to take care of yourself, you need to do this, particularly when you are in a mode where you're so overwhelmed, you can't. It's like you can't find the ideas, or you can't find things that can fill up your cup, if you will. So by having examples of what others are doing, oftentimes help people. Oh, I had thought of that, and that would fill my cup too. So let me try to do this. So thank you for sharing that. And I was also thinking, as I was hearing you, you know, state the facts that, that nurses find themselves, you know, caring for everyone and then not maybe caring as much for for themselves, it's really it's really taken a toll on our profession. And we're hearing some pretty disturbing numbers out there in terms of people who are either exiting the profession or thinking about exiting the profession, the mental health and the state, the well-being of nurses, or in this case, lack thereof. Um, how concerned should we be about the state of healthcare, the state of our profession? We hear so many negative comments. What would you say to aspiring nurses, more specifically aspiring nurses, why in the midst of all of this, being a nurse is an amazing profession? How does one prepare themselves, and what can we tell them, because they hear all this noise, right?
Actually, it's interesting you asked that question because one of my best friends, her daughter just graduated from nursing school. And she did it through the pandemic. And I kept hearing from her, I can't go to clinicals. I can't go to clinicals. We can't go because of the pandemic. And I just told her, I said, this is your passion, right? She goes, yeah. She goes, I know I meant to do this. And I said, yes, you couldn't do clinicals. And, that's okay. But you did your simulation. I know it's not the same. But the nurses who are on staff know you didn't have a clinical rotation. And I just would always hope and pray that our nurses that we do have on staff that are precepting, that they take them under the wing and they show them. And I think that sometimes that's even better because it's real hands-on. It's like you got patients, you're dealing with it, and I think that's better. And I would just encourage those who want to do it. I mean, nursing is a broad. We can do so much. I mean, you can do bedside, you can do home health, you can do the ambulatory sites, you can do clinics, you can even do IT. There's so many variables with nursing, and if it is truly your passion, we need nurses because we need people to take care of our families. And yeah, nurses are burnt out and they're frustrated. I know a lot have left bedside and have gone to different venues of nursing, but because we have such a variety of places that we can go, it's not just bedside, but we still need those bedside nurses because they need to take care of our families and take care of us at some point. So I just always encourage them that, you know what, it will get better, and encourage self-care. And always, I think one of the biggest things is ask questions, especially when they're on the floor. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be like, oh well, that's going to be a stupid question, because nothing's a stupid question. And a lot of times, especially in our culture now, we're really promoting the culture of safety. And if you're afraid to ask or to talk to people, then that defeats the purpose. So I think it's really, really important for our up and coming nurses that they're encouraged and that they want to do the profession, and that they get, you know, a preceptor that is just as encouraging and says, this is a great profession. Yeah, every profession has its ups and its downs. There's negative with every single profession, and there's positive. You just need to find the positives. And if it's truly where you want to be, it will be okay.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I appreciate that very much. So, Jennifer, can you believe the 30 minutes was just like poof, passed super quickly for me. I can't thank you enough for joining us today, and to everyone for listening and sending in your questions. To learn more about our initiatives, our programs, our services, ways to give, or if you're looking to help or medical advice, please visit providence.org. Make sure to also follow us on social media at Providence on Twitter and at Providence Health System on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. Thank you for joining us today.